Hello, my name is Demi Leonardo Morales. Today I'm going to talk about consonant phonemes. The first things that we need to know about this is that consonant phonemes is a sound in a speech that is produced by obstructing or restricting the airflow in some way using the vocal tract. Consonant phonemes are classified by the way they are produced, such as place of articulation, manner of articulation, and voicing. Place of articulation is where in the vocal tract the sound is produced. Here we have the stop sound. This happens when the airflow is completely stopped and then is suddenly released. We have fricative sound. This is when the airflow is forced through a narrow constriction. We have a fricative sound. This is a combination of a stop sound followed by a fricative sound. We also have nasal sound. This is when the velum is lower and the air passes through the nasal cavity. Also, we have lateral or liquid sound. This is when the air passes through one or both sides of the tongue. Then we have tap. This is a quick sound that happens when the tongue touches quickly the hard palate. And finally, we have approximant or glide sound. This is when the articulators close together but they are not fully in contact. Then we have the manner of articulation. This is how the airflow is obstruct. Here we have bilabial sound. This one is produced when both lips comes together. For example, when we produce or p. We have labial dental sound. This is when the lower lips touches the upper teeth. For example, when we produce the sound. We have interdental sound. This is when the tongue is placed between the teeth. For example, when we produce the sound. We have alveolar sound. This is when the tongue touches or comes close to the alveolar ridge. For example, when we produce the sound t, t, or d, d. Postalveolar sound is when the tongue is placed just behind the alveolar ridge in a region closer to the palate. Also, we have palatal sound. This is when the tongue is placed on the hard palate. Then we have velar sound. This is when the tongue is raised toward the soft palate. For example, when we produce the sound k, k, as in cat, or g, g, as in go. Glottal sound is when the sound is produced in the glottis. For example, when we produce the sound ha, ha, ha. And finally, we have palatal alveolar. This is an intermediate articulation point between the palate and the alveolar ridge. Also, we have voicing as a classification, and this is whether the vocal cords vibrate or not when producing sounds. This one is divided just into category: voice sound or voiceless sound. Voice sound is when the glottis is open and the air passes through the vocal cords, and this one vibrate as a consequence. However, voiceless sound is when the glottis is open and the air cannot pass through the vocal cords and they are not vibrating. Now I'm going to provide a chart and I'm going to show you some example putting in context what I explained before. Okay, here we have a chart which is divided in 5 columns, as you can see. In the first one we have the phoneme, then we have voicing or phonation. After that we have the point of articulation, then manner of articulation, and the last column is an example. The first one is p, 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 which is voiceless because the vocal cords don't vibrate. The point of articulation is bilabial because both lips comes together and are in contact. The manner of articulation is stop because the airflow is stopped and then is suddenly released. And an example is pet, pet. The second phoneme is b, 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 which is voice because the vocal cords vibrate. Is bilabial as well. Is a stop, and an example is bet, bet. Then we have the phoneme t, 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 which is voiceless, lingual-alveolar because the tongue plays or touches the alveolar ridge. Is also a stop, and an example is tone, tone. Then we have d, 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 which is voice, lingual-alveolar, a stop, and an example is done. Then we have k, 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 which is voiceless, lingual-alveolar is lingual-alveolar because the tongue touches the soft palate, traces toward the soft palate. The manner of articulation is a stop, and an example is con, con. Okay, here we have the phoneme g, g, which is voice, lingual-alveolar, a stop, and an example gone. Then we have the phoneme which is voiceless, labial dental because the lower lip touches the upper teeth, is fricative because the air is forced through a narrow constriction, and an example is fat. Then we have the phoneme v, v, which is voiced, labial dental, fricative, and an example vat. Then we have the phoneme s, s, which is voiceless, lingual-alveolar, fricative, and an example is sip, sip. Then we have the phoneme z, z, which is voice, lingual-alveolar, fricative, and an example is zip. Then we have the phoneme which is voiceless, lingual dental, fricative, and an example is thick, thick. Then we have the phoneme sh, sh, which is voiceless, lingual palatal, is lingual palatal because the tongue touches the hard palate, is fricative, and an example is pressure, pressure. Then we have the phoneme sh, ch, which is voice, lingual palatal as well, fricative, and an example is pleasure, pleasure. Then we have the phoneme ch, 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 which is voiceless, lingual-alveolar, is a fricative because first the airflow is stopped and then is suddenly released. For example, chin, chin. Then we have j, 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 which is voice, lingual-alveolar, a fricative, and an example is gen, gen. Then we have the phoneme ha, 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 which is voiceless, glottal because we produce the sound in the glottis, is fricative, and an example is helicopter. Then we have the phoneme wa, wa, which is voice, bilabial, is glide because all the articulators comes together, and an example is watch, watch. Then we have the phoneme n, n, which is voice, lingual-alveolar, nasal. The manner of articulation is nasal because the velum is lower and the air passes through the nasal cavity, and an example is nail, nail. Then we have the phoneme m, m, which is voice, bilabial, as well as nasal, and an example is monkey. Monkey. Then we have the phoneme R, which is voice, lingual palatal, liquid, also known as ladder, and is liquid because the airflow passes from one or both sides of the tongue. And an example is crane. Crane. Here we have the phoneme ya, 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 which is voice, lingual palatal, glide, and an example is jellyfish. Jellyfish. Then we have the phoneme eng, which is voice, lingual velar, nasal, and an example is sing. Sing. And finally, we have the phoneme L, which is voice, lingual velar, liquid, and an example is live. Live.